Hello everybody, Namaste. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we'll be studying about ANOVA. Introduction to ANOVA. An introduction to ANOVA is analysis of variance, a statistical method used to analyze differences among groups, means, and their associated procedures. There are two types of ANOVA. We have one-way and two-way ANOVA. In one-way ANOVA, the usage is used to compare the means of three or more independent groups. Assumptions that we make is assumes all the groups have equal variance and the data are normally distributed. Hypothesis testing is test whether there are statistically significant difference between the means of this group. So we'll have two hypotheses which we'll be discussing later on in this video. We have two-way ANOVA, which has multifactorial, examines the influence of two different categorically independent variables on one variable dependent. Interaction evaluates whether the two independent variables interact significantly. Main effect is assesses the individual effects of each independent variable on the dependent variable. Let's look at the assumptions of ANOVA. Homogeneity. The variance of the populations are equal. We need to assume that the groups that we are working with are either drawn from the same population or have the same variance. Independence. Observation in each group are independent of each other. Normality. The data within each group are normally distributed. So normal distribution plays an important role here. Now let's look at the hypothesis testing. Hypothesis testing in ANOVA, we have two types of hypotheses that we need to assume. Number one is null hypotheses, suggests that there are no difference among the group means. That means the mean of group 1 is equal to group 2 is equal to group 3 and so on. We make this hypothesis, basically null hypothesis is a hypothesis that we make in order to find out whether there is a significant difference or not. If this is not accepted or rejected, we have another hypothesis known as the alternative hypothesis, claiming that there are difference among the group means. That means the means are significantly different from each other. Let's look at the ANOVA test, which is analysis of the variance. Determines whether the difference among the group means are statistically significant. So we assume these type of hypotheses, go about with our procedure, and then we identify whether the means are significant from each other or not. Interpreting ANOVA results. So let's look at the interpretation. Between group variation measures the variability among the group means. Within group variation measures the variability within each group and errors. So basically, we have between group variation and within group variation. Between group means between the groups. That is, we have two individual groups or two independent groups, and we identify whether the variance or the variability is the same or the different by taking our hypotheses into the picture. We have within group variation in which we measure the variability within each group. So we check within each group about the errors and variabilities. We have a F test which assesses whether the between group variation is significantly larger than within the group variation. We have post hoc test in ANOVA. The purpose is used to identify which specific group means differ from each other. So the purpose here is to identify. So everything is based on mean variation and the significance difference between them. So the purpose is used to identify which specific group of mean. We have different groups and which specific group differs from each other. Then we have adjustments. Several adjustments available to control for family-wise error traits. Then we have comparison, compares all possible pairs of group means. Let's look at the limitations and alternatives to ANOVA. The limitation is may not be suitable for non-parametric data. Alternatives is to explore non-parametric data tests like the Kruskal-Wallis test. So here we discuss the limitation and alternatives of ANOVA. ANOVA as a summary, let's revise it again. ANOVA basically stands for analysis of variance. Now, as variance is the square of the standard deviation, so all lies between the standard deviation, the mean, and the variance. A variance is basically the square of the deviation from the mean. That means the square of the standard deviation. Here, there is a statistical method used to analyze difference among the groups. So when we have different groups to compete from each other, we look into it and look how significantly different or how different are they from each other. We looked into two ways of ANOVA, one way and two way. Into one way, we have three or more independent groups, and we have our assumptions and hypothesis testing. In two-way, we have multifactorial, determines the influence of two different categories on independent variables. We have their interaction and their main effects. We have our assumptions. We make our hypotheses assumptions, where we have null and alternative hypotheses. Null hypothesis means we compare all the means are same, and alternative hypothesis is when the null hypothesis is rejected, we take up the alternative hypothesis, which basically means that there is a significant difference. I hope you understood the video. Until then, keep learning and keep understanding. Thank you so much.